I'm Andrew Sheeran. I'm a PhD student in environmental engineering at the University of Rhode Island, and I will be presenting my research topic, which takes a data-driven approach to enhancing street sweeping in urban areas. Stormwater runoff is a major transport of pollutants, particularly heavy metals, nutrients, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and microplastics, which can accumulate rapidly in urban areas. And street sweeping can be an effective way to reduce this pollution entering our water bodies. So, the Rhode Island Department of Transportation is seeking to enhance their street sweeping program in order to reduce pollution. The goal of this study is to take a computer-based and data-driven approach to enhancing the street sweeping in the urban areas that considers road characteristics, pollution composition, and weather conditions. Methodology behind this project includes sample collection and computer-based modeling. For sample collection, we'll collect street solid and stormwater samples and conduct a variety of different analyses on them to understand their pollutant composition and the amount of loading. And then we also consider GIS metrics, such as land use, canopy coverage, and road quality, as well as weather conditions, to find correlation between what pollutants show up on the road, where those pollutants may accumulate, and how much of them there are. This data will feed into a model that will enhance street sweeping by prioritizing where and when to sweep. Now let's look at some of our modeling approaches. We first have a road prioritization model. This map shows our study area, Warwick, Rhode Island. The prioritization model considers three metrics. We have our residential land use, we have our commercial land use, and canopy coverage. These metrics are weighted and normalized in order to calculate priority scores for the roads in Warwick. These priority scores will be used to determine which roads we should sweep more frequently or prioritize. This particular example shows a map of the spring prioritization score, where we have weighted commercial areas higher than residential and forested areas. We will also have priority scores for summer and fall seasons. For example, in the fall, we would weigh canopy coverage as a more important metric in order to capture some of the nutrients falling from trees. The road prioritization map will plug in to our next tool, which is called the Sweeper tool. Sweeper tracks pollutant accumulation, stormwater wash-off, and street sweeper removal across different scenarios. Each scenario will consider different sweeping frequencies dependent on the prioritization scores. Let's look a little bit at how this model works. So we have three scenarios here in this figure. In the top graph, we show our baseline scenario, which tracks pollutant accumulation and wash-off, but there's no sweeping. In our second scenario, it's called our ideal scenario. Here, we sweep the day before a large rain event occurs. Lastly, we have a slope-based scenario, which sweeps once the slope of the accumulation line falls below a certain threshold. In other words, we sweep once the pollution starts to reach its saturation point. Looking at some of the results of these scenarios, we see a 25% reduction of pollution wash-off in the ideal scenario compared to the baseline scenario. We only see an 11% reduction in the slope-based scenario compared to the baseline scenario, even though we sweep almost twice as many times in the slope-based scenario compared to the ideal scenario. This shows that sweeping more frequently doesn't necessarily mean you're removing more pollution, but instead we should be sweeping at the opportune moments. Now let's look at some of the stormwater analysis results. We have found trends in both season and land use. For heavy metals, we see a much higher concentration range in the spring samples compared to our fall samples. And we've also found much higher nutrient concentrations in our forested land use areas compared to our commercial and residential land use areas. So overall, we have found that the frequency and timing of street sweeping has a very significant impact on the transport of the pollutants through stormwater runoff, and that determining the location of sweeping should be based on land use and season. These findings, we hope to combine our models in order to determine the optimal street sweeping schedule for RIDOT to implement in order to reduce as much pollution as possible. Some future work would include collecting more samples in order to calibrate our models. Also, we want to develop a SWIM model to help simulate the rainfall and runoff through a drainage network. And lastly, we want to conduct environmental life cycle assessment, evaluating the impacts of this enhanced street sweeping program.